So I'll be using the next 10 minutes or so to talk you through sort of a broad overview of the trends, the challenges, and the opportunities in the digital agriculture sector as a whole, not just only focusing on the livestock sector. And let me start by just setting the scene, presenting you with some of the facts and figures of the sector today. We've got over 1,000 unique digital innovations that are being present in just in low and middle income countries. Many of them present in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, but altogether covering an astonishing more than 81 countries to date. Although very interesting to see, the vast majority of them, over 60%, are actually present in just a handful of countries, namely 10. And as you will see today among the innovators, also 4 out of the 5 innovators presenting today are actually present in one of these countries, namely Kenya. So a very strong presence from East Asia there. Now, at the same time, I think this is important for us to keep in mind. Despite this massive number of digital innovations, only approximately 10% of smallholder farmers in low and middle income countries are actually accessing and using digital agriculture innovations to date, and only 26% of them are women. And another thing, which I think is an important fact, given that this is a livestock event, livestock is actually not so very well represented. The vast majority of the innovations are targeting crop production. What do we do with digital technologies? What are they being used for? I think we're seeing them across the value chain, and we'll see that also today among the innovators later in the presentations. So it goes from all the way downstream, thinking about access to finance and access to seeds and chemical inputs, to the production, getting all kinds of decision-making support, for example, and managing support, but then going downstream to traceability systems, distribution, and even consumption support. So that really gives us a broad range of different categories. But if I need to summarize it, I would say that they do basically 2 major things in the value chains. They provide us a sense of control, so helping us to get more insight on what's happening within agricultural production, and supporting with optimization, becoming more efficient and more effective with the production. In 2022, I co-authored together with Wageningen research colleagues a study for FAO's State of Food and Agriculture report, which was at that time focusing on digital and automation technologies. And we developed as one of our outputs this particular illustration, giving a broad overview of all the range of technologies, digital technologies present in the agriculture sector today, ranging all the way from technologies that are fairly simple and providing less control to very advanced technologies. Now, the ones that are most commonly used in low and middle income countries, perhaps not surprisingly, are digital solutions ranging from IVR and SMS services, call centers, as we'll also see a good example today with Gabo. But then you can also see some examples of, for example, drones. Again, we got a good case today. So these all give us more remote sensing, including also IoT devices. And this, I think, is also a good category in the livestock sector. And lastly, the examples of whole farm management. I think these are the ones primarily available in low and middle income countries. What is interesting, though, if you look at this illustration, we could not have envisioned at the time yet that generative AI would take off so quickly and take such a flight. And interesting, we also did not envision that perhaps initially this would especially take off among the digital solutions, with most of the examples today, for example, chat bots that we're seeing popping up. What do we think? What are the major expectations of digitalization and automation? Well, I think our initial expectations were very, very high. With a very broad range of ideas about increased productivity and market access, obviously, but also a bit more broader, like inclusion of women in the sector and taking youth back to agriculture, making it, an attractive sector for them again, financial access, etc., etc. But over the last decade or so, we learned a lot of lessons, and we found out that it's a lot more challenging, perhaps, than we had anticipated. Some of these challenges were well known in the agricultural sector. I think issues around infrastructure and also how social norms and inequalities are really shaping the adoption of technologies. But others perhaps were something that was new all kinds of ethical concerns around data and around agency, around privacy, and the questions around environmental sustainability. What does it do when digitalization is really starting to have an impact? And what does it do when everyone is connected and we have huge power consumption and we need to be mining to actually make the hardware necessary? If I put everything together, we can identify a series of trends, and I want to discuss those with you. So a lot of these trends, I say, are trends based on the lessons that we learned. And I've seen this happening as kind of an integrated, an iterative process. And I'm very happy to actually see that we're using the lessons to take the next steps in the sector. The question is, can we take this further, and won't we be repeating some of our issues from the past? The shifting focus from access to thinking more about capacity, digital literacy, for example, but also really think about how are farmers and how are other actors in the value chain truly benefiting from digital innovations. Not only thinking about the number of registered users, but truly thinking about the impact of an innovation. Another major trend, I think, is about integrated and decentralized solutions. On the one hand, they seem to be conflicting, but on the other hand, I think it's about we're diversifying to more and more countries, reusing existing innovations and using them for new approaches and new purposes. And on the other hand, we're bringing all kinds of services together, what they also sometimes refer to as bundled services, partnerships between different kinds of startups. And this brings us at the same time the opportunity to sometimes diversify then to different types of hardware or technological opportunities. Platforms, for example, the example of Cobalt today, that are offering their service through different means, which helps then to achieve digital inclusion. If you are diversifying, you can also include more diverse people. So this is, I think, a major issue that is on everyone's agenda, becoming more inclusive, following the promise of leaving no one behind, as is written in the SDGs. And it also means at the same time that the focus is shifting away from just thinking about men versus women and the inclusion of women, thinking about intersectionality. Who are the people that are adopting the technologies? They're never just a woman or just a man. It might be a pastoralist. There might be someone living in a urban area as well. They might be young or old. They might be married or not. And these all affect people's ability to be included in the sector. And then on top of that, and I think it links to it, think about human-centered design. Who are the users and what are their needs? What are their demands? What are their capacities? And I think this is really on the agenda. At the same time, and I think especially in the livestock sector, we can wonder, is this enough? Should we think also of our animals, for example, as users of digital technologies, especially when linking it to IoT devices? And what about the environment? Are they somehow also part of the design process? And that links to responsible innovation, thinking about unintended consequences. What are the long-term impacts and effects of the technologies that are being introduced? Not just only economically, thinking about improving people's incomes, but also social impacts. What does it do to the community systems and environmental impacts, as I already mentioned? Of course, responsible innovation comes with thinking about data and ethics and governance, farmer-centric models, who is in power, who is in the driver's seat, and AI ethics becoming more and more on the agenda. Three trends which I think are emerging, and we need to watch them carefully because they could become subjective or have negative consequences. One, we see some drops in the amount of money available for digital agriculture. It means some services are not surviving, they may be disappearing, or projects are not being renewed. Perhaps fewer services entering the market. Question is this a good thing, or is it actually a sign of the sector maturing? Artificial intelligence, it's almost like a gold rush that's going on, but we all want to be there. We all want to use the opportunities that it offers, but there's also concerns about biases, about hallucinations, about the data that is being used to train models. And lastly, appropriation. In practice, only the 10% is using agricultural digital technologies, but that doesn't mean that these people are not using any kinds of digital services. They may be using WhatsApp or Facebook or accessing YouTube. And the question is that a good thing or not? It means it's very frugal. It matches their capacities. Oftentimes it's readily available, but it's also playing a lot of power in the hands of just a few actors. I want to close up with this last slide. because I think we can summarize this in some thoughts about the impact. And I think we're progressing through the hype cycle. We're past this moment where we just had these huge expectations, and we're becoming a bit more realistic about it. Not being disillusioned anymore, but thinking about productivity. What is really, really having an impact, and what matters the most? Maybe there's less financial support over the next few years. Again, perhaps that just helps us to remain with the strongest businesses and the strongest models that have actually the best chance of having impact. My question for the sector is, can we actually continue doing this and without repeating the same cycles for now that AI is becoming such a big thing? And the other thing, I think the focus on inclusion and the benefits, the offline impact, is really demanding that everyone starts to think from the solution rather than the technological opportunities. What matches with people and what actually has the best outputs? Better matches with the supply and demand side, more thoughtful funding, but also thinking about inclusion and equity, more positive impact, and hopefully also a lot more sustainability. That's it from me for now. Thank you for your attention, and I really am looking forward to today's innovators. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariëtte. That was really fantastic. I think you covered a lot of really important themes that we have also tried to encourage our presenters to bring out later. Is what real world problems are they trying to solve? Start with the problem, not with the technology. Quick question for you. What do you mean by frugal innovations?
Yeah, I noticed sometimes this is a topic that I've been working on, so I'm very much aware, and I know especially English speakers sometimes have a different concept. Frugal innovation in the innovation sciences relates not just only to cheap innovations, but also to innovations that sometimes are simplified or can be very sustainable. So the way I interpret it also in my research is about trying to find the best balance between what is technologically possible and what is fitting within a very specific context. And that's why I also talked about this, the examples of the social media or like a WhatsApp, which is a platform that is quite simple, at least on the interface side, and therefore quite easily fits with a lot of potential users' capacities, and it's relatively cheap to use, etc., etc. So this in innovation sciences can be seen as a frugal innovation.
That's great, thanks. And I think some of the innovations we'll hear from shortly might qualify as that. So that'll be interesting to explore.